Progressive presents Mindflowness with Flo.
Before you lies a beautiful meadow. In that meadow, Progressive Direct has placed its auto insurance rates alongside those of competitors. You select the lowest rate and feel a great sense of calm. A great sense of...
Compare Progressive Direct rates with competitors' rates so you can rest easy. Visit Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Blog Talk Radio.
Best-selling and award-winning author of true crime and crime fiction, Yvonne Mason is back with a brand new book, The Pink Canary, a book that delves into the life of a drag queen and a marvelous whodunit. You can find this and all of Yvonne's other works on Amazon.com or find Yvonne Mason on Facebook and Twitter.
You're gonna kill me.
Buy your copy of Pink Canary now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is a rainy Saturday night here, or Friday. No, it's Friday night. I'm a day ahead of myself. What can I say? I've been awake for 2 days and nights. This is Off the Chain. I'm your host, Yvonne Mason, and that was an ad by my friend Chris Dunham for my book, Pink Canary. It is a comedy, whodunit, mystery, and if you like drag queens, and if you like nightclubs, and if you like murder mysteries, that's a book all rolled into one nice, neat little package. And the beautiful part is, if you like Key West, like I love Key West, it's my favorite city. I've been to many countries all over the world. Key West is still my favorite city. Then you will love this book because that's where the book is set. And I have to send a shout out to my friend Peter Fondura, who is in the book as Penelope. He is the comic relief. He is a drag queen in the book, and to my friend Vicki Lane, who is a wonderful professional drag queen who performed in New York and also in Canada, where she lives now. If it hadn't have been for Vicki, I wouldn't have known that drag queens don't curse. They say, "Oh, Mary," instead of "Oh, damn." And it sounds funny, but that's what they do. So, yeah, if you like to know about the drag queens and the murder mysteries, check out The Pink Canary because it is fall down funny. That being said, after I choke myself up, as I do every morning because I'm a numbers person, I went and checked on our show. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is our show. It's not my show. It's all of our show. We have reached 31,091 listeners just on the show. Just right here on Blog Talk Radio. And our wonderful friends from Australia are our best listeners. They're 97% of my listening base. I don't know what we do, but Australia loves us. When you add all the podcasts, because this thing shows up on iTunes, YouTube, Spreaker, Stitcher, FM.com, TuneIn Radio, Mixcloud, SoundCloud, podcast.com, Podcast Garden, we are at 45,200 listeners in over 70 countries. I don't know about y'all, but I'm excited about that because we're only 5,000 listeners, less than 5,000 listeners away from 50,000 listeners with all the podcast. Show's not just now rolled into its second year. And it's people like guests that keep coming back and new guests like my guest tonight, author Chrys Fey. And when I spell her name, y'all going to go, what? Just hang tight, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get there. So I want to say thank you to all of y'all, listeners and guests alike, because this is your show. It's not my show. It is your show. And I am very humbled and very appreciative of each and every one of you. And that brings me to my guest tonight, author Chrys Fey. She spells her name Chrys, last name Fey. Kind of catchy, I thought. She is the author of Disaster Crime Series, as well as these released from the Wild Rose Press, 30 Seconds, Ghost of Death, and Witch of Death. She is an administrator for the Insecure Writers Support Group. I saw that and just fell out on the floor laughing because that fits us writers so well. Most of us are insecure, and 99% of us need a support group for several reasons. One, we're insecure, and two, writing is an addiction. It is our drug of choice. So they nailed it with this title, and I love it. And she also runs their Goodreads book club, and I cannot talk tonight, so y'all just bear with me. She's also an editor for Dancing Lemur Press. And what is so interesting is when Chrys was 6 years old, she realized she wanted to be a writer by watching her mother pursue publication. She started writing her first novel, which flourished into a series, and she later rewrote it at 17. She lives here in Florida, where I do, and she's always on the lookout for hurricanes. And ladies and gentlemen, this is our hurricane season, and right now we're having bad storms. So if we go out, I will bring Chrys back at another time if I can't get her back. Chrys has 4 adopted cats and 3 nephews, and I'm not sure which are the most important in her life, but they all keep her entertained with their antics. So with that, my darling new friend, welcome. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here, too.
Me too. And I told Chrys, don't be nervous. It's just me and her and 45,000 other listeners. It's no big deal. It's okay. And we're going to get all of her deepest, darkest secrets. It's just us girls tonight on the show. So we got this. So there's so many things for us to talk about. But I really want to start, Chrys, with when you were 6 years old. That's when you decided you wanted to be a writer. So this is something that you have pursued literally all of your life. And watching your mother do her publications, why did that stick with you so much? What brought that creative desire to your forefront?
Well, my mom would sit at the dining room table, and she would pin children's stories for us kids, me and my brothers and sisters. And she would illustrate them. She would even, laminate them and everything. And she would read them to us. And I just loved it that someone could create something like that you could actually write a story. And you could either publish it or you could read it to your children and pass that on. And it just was like a magical thing that, my mom was doing that and sharing that with us. And she even worked in elementary schools, in the libraries, in the media centers, and she was at my school, and she would read to the classes, and I was just always so proud when my class had to go to the media center, and she was there, and she would read her stories that she just wrote at home and put together at home, and I would just tell all of my friends, that's my mom, and I want to be a writer when I get older. And I started penning my own little children's stories just to mimic her because she was my idol. And it just flourished from there. When I was 12, that's when I knew, definitely, I started writing my first novel, and I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to publish. And I saw my mom, sending out submissions and everything, and I knew it was tough, but I wanted to do it.
Well, what I found interesting is You mentioned the word magical when you said your mother created these wonderful, wonderful stories. And you mentioned the word magical, which brings me full circle back to your pen name, Chrys Fey. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to spell it again because you're going to want to go and buy her books. And if you look it up under Chris, you're not going to find it. You have to know you cannot go now. You have to wait till after the show. It's Chrys, the last name Fey. How in the world did you come up with such a unique pen name?
Well, at first I was just going to use my real first name, Christine, and I was just going to figure out a last name, a new last name to go with that. And it wasn't working. So I was like, well, my nickname in real life is Chrissy, and some people have called me Chrys. And I was like, how about I shorten that? But I need to make it look mysterious. I don't just want it to be Chrys with an I. I decided to put a Y in there, and I thought it made it look different. It made it look intriguing, hoping that if I did publish, someone would see it on the cover of one of my books and be like, well, that's an interesting name.
It caught my eye.
Yeah, and I wanted the last name to sort of have a meaning. And at the time when I was creating my pen name, I was writing a lot of supernatural stories and paranormal fantasy, and I just started looking up words and names in the dictionary and trying to find synonyms that would work with it, and I ended up looking under magical, and I found the word Fey, and it just clicked, Chrys Fey.
Well, you know, or you may not know, but because I study a lot of Scotch-Irish dialect and a lot of Scotch-Irish history because that's where my heritage is. Fey is an old Scottish word for witch, magical. So you just incorporated the whole thing into a wonderful, wonderful name. And I'm going, yeah, I kind of like that.
Yeah.
It rolls off the tongue. It stays with you, and you can't help but remember Chrys Fey, Chrys Magic, Magical Chrys. It's what now? Let's go back and your first story. And ladies and gentlemen, talk about magical. She was 12 years old. And she got an idea for a book when she discovered something ordinary. She just found something ordinary. And her magical mind took over. Explain to us what you found.
Well, I had just gotten done playing a game of basketball. I was by myself, and I sat down in the grass next to my home, and my fingers were just playing with the grass and digging down a little deep, and I felt something. And my mind, I was like, it's a key, and this is because I love The Secret Garden, and I was like, it's a key. And so I start digging into the grass for it, and I pull it out, and it wasn't a key. It was a rusted screw with a crooked tip. And for some reason, I guess I'll never really know, it was the universe, but while looking at that rusted screw, I got an idea for a story, and that screw was the key for this world. So I got up, I ran into the house, I grabbed pen and paper, I ran back to that very same spot where I found the screw, and I started writing my first book, and I was only 12.
What I find amazing is the depth of your imagination. As soon as you found that screw in that particular spot, it wouldn't do for you to go in your room and write. You had to go right back there because that was a magical place.
Yeah, I just felt that's where, like, the story originated from. So I had to go back there to catch it.
So what was the story about? Because in your bio it says you wrote 3 books in 4 years that was involving the screw and, of course, the little tentacles that went out. What was this story about?
Well, I don't want to reveal too much because I have rewritten them, and I am trying to get representation for the first book in the series, but it did go through a transformation during the rewrite. It was about this young girl, my age, at the time when I was 12. She was 12. And she had these amazing powers, and she lived in a different world that was not like ours at all. and a lot of different like mystery things happen, and she solves some crimes that like sort of magical crimes, I guess you could say, that happen in that world, and her powers get bigger, and it was just this big story of this world and this character, and it just was something like really big. And after writing the 3 books, I ended up getting writer's block, and I was struggling to continue writing. So a couple of months I didn't write at all, and I realized the one reason why I stopped writing was because I had matured. Like at that time I was 17, but my characters, they were 17 too, but they just didn't seem to reflect my maturity level, and that's when I decided to rewrite all of the books from the very beginning.
And did you find that in rewriting the books that you had matured to the point that your characters had to grow up with you in order to be believable, because you couldn't talk in a 12-year-old voice anymore because you weren't 12 anymore?
Yes. Like my characters, I did try and get them to age along with me, but I guess it was just because I started the story when I was 12, and I guess like the narrative and everything that I had done throughout those books, it just didn't seem to be at my maturity level at 17. And I was struggling with, the characters and the ages, even though they were supposed to be my age. I was just struggling with all of it, and it took me a long time to actually realize that that was the problem. And I had to sort of recreate it and change it with the characters being older.
The reason I'm bringing this up, ladies and gentlemen, there is a point. And the point is, there's this young writer that's been writing since she was 12 years old, knew she wanted to write at 6. She writes these beautiful books, and she hits a roadblock. She's young. And at that age, not understanding one's on mental intellect and one's on drive because they haven't lived long enough, and putting everything you've got into this creation, and then to find it didn't work and she couldn't do what she wanted to do with it. She tried to get it published, and as with all of us in the indie world, we have hit roadblocks. It took me over 30 years to publish. I published my first book at 56 years old, and I wrote that book in my 30s. So I understand what happened when she hit the wall, and it caused a depression. And there's nothing wrong with that, because one is desperate when we put that much work into something we love, and then to have it deflate in an instant, it'll put us up against a wall. How did you handle that?
I just kept on pushing. Like, even when I finished the book 1 after rewriting it, and I was trying to get representation, I was trying to get publication, and I just kept getting denials, and it hurt, it stung, and I just kept wondering, like, what do I have to do? Because it seems like, everybody has, like, these remedies, like, oh, you can publish short stories, you have to build your resume and everything, and, I would try and do that, and it just wasn't successful. Everything I did, it just wasn't working out. And that just pulled me down into such a depression where I just kept thinking, it's not going to happen. What do I have to do? But I guess you could say my drive for this dream to be published, to be an author, and really the life of being a writer, having like the writing life, that's what I wanted. And I didn't want to give that up, no matter how bad it got, I just kept pushing through and striving for that goal. Even when I would tell myself, like, I just need to quit. I would say that one moment, and then the next moment I'd be sending out another query and just, like, fingers crossed, like, hoping that it would work. But that was the thing with me. I just kept on pushing. I did not want to give up.
If I could wallpaper your house, my house, and every listener's house with the times that I've said, I'm quitting. But it's like my brother, who, and my first book was about him. He's mentally and physically challenged. And I could hear him in my ear. And he lives Georgia. I live down here in Florida. But I could hear him in my ear saying, Yvonne, just keep doing it. Just do it. Just do it. Because he never gave up. He's never given up. And this is a man who was supposed to fail. And I'm thinking to myself, if he succeeds in what it is he has a passion about, who am I? How dare I destroy my own dream because other people are saying, you're not good enough, you can't do it, you're too stupid, you can't write, you don't know how to put sentences together, you do okay for what you do, but it's still not good enough. Who am I to allow other people to steal my dreams? I didn't give them permission. And like we were talking before the show, I got rid of all those negative people. And now I just want to tell them thank you for telling me no, and surround myself with positive people. And look at myself in the mirror, and I'm sure you do too, every day and say, okay, Vaughn, today we put on our big girl panties.
Yeah.
And today we do one more thing. And Chrys, to see where you've come, and to see that once you tell that depression, get the hell out of my way because you're not stopping me, then you found your niche, which I've never, in all the books that I've written since I was 5 years old, I have never seen someone write crime in the vein that you write in. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get around to it. Just sit tight. It'll be all right. So you write what you know. And because we live in Florida, tell the folks what you write about.
Well, I have the Disaster Crime series, and the first book is called Hurricane Crimes. So there's a lot of hurricane action in that first story based on the experiences that I've had as a Floridian with hurricanes and tropical storms.
And ladies and gentlemen, we've had some hurricanes, haven't we, Chrys?
Oh, yes, we have.
But you don't just write about hurricanes. Oh, and before we continue with this, we have to give a shout-out to our friends, my friend, author Robbie Cox and author Maggie Adams, because they sort of put us together. Robbie's been on the show several times. The man's not right in the head. He really is not right in the head. Seriously, considering having the man committed, but another story. So you wrote, and it's not just disaster books. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on in these books.
Yes.
Which I find amazing. How in the world do you wrap your head around it?
I don't know. The stories are romantic suspense. So there's romance, there's crimes, and there's, of course, the disaster when the disaster comes into the story. And I don't know. I wanted to write about, first it was about weather that I knew as a Floridian, and that was hurricanes. And I just wanted to do something more unique than that. I wanted to do something more. And I love romance stories, especially romantic suspense. So it was just a no-brainer for me to do that genre. And I just had to sit back and, okay, well, I want this character, this strong, female, Beth Kennedy, a self-defense instructor. And, well, I need someone to sort of pair her up with, and that was Donovan Goldwyn. He's a monster truck driver. And I need romance, I need passion to balance out the crime and the disaster. I didn't want stories that were just all crimes, disasters, intense stuff in that way. I wanted lighter stuff with the romance and happy moments for my characters.
You got more courage than I do. I'm going to tell you. I mean, ladies, listen to this. Now, we as writers write what we know.
Yes.
Chrys knows about hurricanes because hurricanes in Florida are like tornadoes in Georgia where I'm from. And I expect you to do a tornado crime thing in some future. She wrote the hurricane crimes, the seismic crimes. Now this has got to be like earthquakes.
Yes, it's earthquakes in San Francisco. So my characters, they are Floridians in Central Florida, and they go to San Francisco in that story to hunt down a killer.
Okay, and then they get involved in an earthquake. Now, she really likes to put her people on the edge. Then she does a short story. It was called Lightning Crimes.
Yes, it's a teaser set between book 2 and book 3, and it's back in Central Florida, and, you know, we have a lot of thunderstorms here in Central Florida, so I wanted to do just a short story for the fans of the series and just to give them something a little more, and I figured, well, a lightning storm is another good weather anomaly to write about.
And we do have very serious lightning down here. I mean, we have people on the golf course, and the sun is shining, and they're playing golf, and they're hitting them in the pond, so the alligators will have dessert. And then all of a sudden, one of them is laying on the 18th hole because he's been struck by lightning that's 5 miles away.
Yes.
And it does happen here. So, yeah, she's not kidding. And it's beautiful. The lightning is beautiful, but as anything that is beautiful, it's usually deadly.
Yes.
So there you go. Now then, we jump over to Tsunami Crimes.
Yes, that's the newest release. And I love all of the stories in the series, but that one is my favorite because it's just so much more intense than all of the other stories. When you think about a tsunami, those waves are so powerful. And what my characters go through, it amazes me what I put them through and how I got them through all of that. So that story is definitely my favorite one so far.
What I want to know is when you sleep at night, if you sleep at night, do your characters come and haunt you for putting them through all of this?
No, I try, even though I put them through a lot, not only the disasters, but the crime aspect. They have people coming after them in each of the stories, and things get very dangerous with these criminals coming after them, and then when you add in the disasters, it gets even more dangerous. Yeah. But I try to also give them a lot of good moments. I try and give them happy moments together or with family and friends. I try to balance that out, and I think they forgive me because they have a good relationship and they have good things in their life. It's just, yeah, I do. I put them through some bad stuff.
You think? I mean, hurricanes, seismic adventures, lightning, tsunami. What's next?
Oh, well, I actually just signed the contract for Flaming Crimes. And
now
that
we're going to have
once
fire.
Again, yes, that's going to be set in Central Florida. The entire story is in Central Florida. And there's an arsonist going around setting fires, and of course they're being targeted by someone. Whether or not it's the same person, you'll have to find out. But a fire gets very close to their home, and it actually, all of the fire scenes came from my real life. When I was about 11 years old, a fire came really right next to my home. It burned completely around my house. The firefighters in my area were just amazing. They saved my home. They saved all the homes in my neighborhood. And during that day, there were other fires going on in the city, and nobody lost a home. So it was amazing. The firefighters and everybody, the first responders, did a great job. But
and ladies and gentlemen, we do have fires down here, especially this time of year, because it's like I said, it could be clear as a bell here in my neighborhood, and 5 miles over in Savannah, lightning could strike. And if we haven't had rain in a day or two, you're going to get a fire, right?
Right. And that's actually funny that you mentioned that, because earlier this year, it was in January when Tsunami Crimes came out, and I did a blog tour, and in one of the guest posts that I did, I mentioned that I was writing and I had submitted flaming crimes, and someone had made a comment saying, fires in Florida, in Central Florida, and I was like, yes. And this past year, it was, I think it was March and April and May, there were a lot of fires throughout Florida and Central Florida. So I was like, it happens. And I remember when it happened when I was either 10 or 11, and I got out of school, and I was with my best friend and her dad. He was bringing me home, and we saw a smoke plume in the distance, and her father said, it looks like it's right next to your house, to me. And I looked at it, and I just knew. I was like, he's right. It is right next to my house. Sure enough, it really was. He pulled up, and he actually stopped at the end of the street, and I could see the flames right there burning a tree right next to my house. And he stopped to talk to a neighbor, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, go, go, go. Like, there is a fire right next to my house. But when he finally dropped me off, like, I just dropped my backpack on the driveway, and I ran into my house. I believe I grabbed a little bit of clothes and stuffed it into a garbage bag, and I ran back out, and there was just flames all right next to my house. And that day I really did think I was going to lose my house, and it was terrifying. A lot of the scenes in Flaming Crimes comes directly from my life. I just did a little spin on some of them, made them just a tad bit more dramatic for fiction. But yeah, so when you read, or if anybody reads the fire scenes, you can bet that all of them are from my real life.
I don't know how you could have made it more dramatic. I mean, the fire's right there at your house. You're 11 years old, and you run in the house and grab clothes. And it's amazing that it. And ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand, here in Florida, when a fire catches, and if during our dry season, which runs from November to June, if you throw a cigarette out on the highway, if a charcoal out of a grill gets out, or a lawnmower backfires and sparks, any little thing can start a fire, because you have undergrowth, you have shrubs, and all this stuff is dry and brittle. Our palm trees will go up like a matchstick. So I'm seeing these scenes that Chrys is talking about, and seeing this fire at her house, and I'm thinking, the child runs in the house and grabs clothes. She should have just run the hell out of the neighborhood.
I still remember so much about that day. I was just so terrified. I didn't know what to do. When my best friend's dad had parked at the end of the road to talk to a neighbor, I had actually saw my mom run out onto the driveway, look and see that the fire was right there burning a tree, and run back up into the house. So, when I saw my mom run back in, when I got dropped off, well, I had to run in too. And it was just so terrifying, though, that I didn't want to stay in the house. So after I did grab some clothes and it was put in the trunk of the car, I was standing on the driveway, and I was freaking out to the point where my mom told my brother to put me in the car and drive me into the road. So I was put into the car with the dog and driven to the end of the road, and then I stayed there and he ran back, but I couldn't stay in the car. Like, it's just fear does strange things to you. I got out of the car and I was standing in the middle of the road, just terrified, not knowing what I could do, knowing that I couldn't do anything, and seeing like my family running in and out. And finally, a group of neighbors came and they were standing at the end of the road where I was. And I got so mad that I almost wanted to yell at them, like, why are you just standing there and watching? Like, they were watching, like, my family, like, scramble to save our pets, our belongings. And just seconds before I almost yelled at them, the fire trucks came down the road. And when they came, I sort of ran after them so I can keep an eye on what was going on. And a few minutes after they came, my best friend and her dad came back, and I just remember that my best friend came out of the car and tears were flowing down her face, and we just hugged each other. And we stood in the middle of the road while her dad helped get our pets out of the house, and my family were doing everything that they could, and the firefighters were doing what they could. We just stood there and watched. And I remember seeing a little flicker of a flame come to the side of the road, jump over the road. It literally like hopscotched. It landed in the middle of the road and then jumped to the other side, and the other side of the road where we had brush caught on fire. And like that was a scene that it's in Flaming Crimes. A lot of this is in Flaming Crimes. And that's something that I can't forget that. And just how like the fire acts and how it moves, and it just seems so much alive. And I try to like embody that in my story.
And anyone that's never been near a fire like that, thankfully we haven't. There are times I can go out of the house and say, oh, there's a fire burning somewhere, and lo and behold, it can be way down in Martin County, but we get the wind shifts and it sends the smell of the smoke. But ladies and gentlemen, if you've never seen a fire, a large fire, or been in a large fire, it literally, like Chrys says, it comes alive and it will jump. And it will find the path of least resistance to get to that dry stuff that it wants to eat alive. It literally eats everything in its path. And if you don't get it under control, it's done. Going up 95, when I first came down here in 2006, there were ravages of where that huge brush fire had happened right before I got down here, and they had closed off 95. And you see the history of that fire and the trees that are still standing that have been burnt, the underbrush that has been burnt, and you can see the path of it. A fire has a path, ladies and gentlemen, and if you look at it after, you can see how the path of that fire went, even the direction. Isn't that true, Chrys?
It is. I remember it was the very next day. I did not go to school. My other siblings went back to school that day, but I did not. I was too terrified. I stayed home, and my dad and we walked around our property. The fire, it came right up to our property line on all sides. And on all sides. And my dad was taking pictures, and I was just walking through, and there's charcoal and ashes just covering the ground. The palmetto bushes are just like little stumps, and they're just blackened stumps. The trees were black. A lot of them, they didn't have their branches. We could see houses from like 2 or 3 streets down because the fire went that far and just burned everything. And before that, you could never see any houses. We had so many trees and brush all around. We felt pretty secluded. But right after the fire, you could see houses from like 3 streets down clearly. And you could see exactly where it burned, where it went, the direction, like you said, and it's really surreal to see the nature that just the day before was growing, it was flourishing, it was vibrant, just to see everything black and burned. It's very surreal.
And surprisingly enough, ladies and gentlemen, I know y'all are going to think that I have completely gone around the bend, but surprisingly enough, and Chrys will probably agree with me, that is sometimes nature's way of regenerating the earth and starting new growth. Because how long after the fire did you start seeing the greenery again?
I'm not really sure how long it took, but I do believe that it was just a year later. A lot of the trees were green again. The palmetto bushes were growing again. There was grass again. So I believe it just took about a year for things to start really growing again and for like a lot of the green to come back. For that particular fire, though, and the fires that were going on in my area, those were actually set by an arsonist that was going around.
I hope they caught the arsonist.
I believe they did. I'm not positive, but I really do. I believe they did.
So that's where she came up with the flaming crimes, the arsonist and all from her childhood. And you're right. Sometimes fires are started because they're simply stupid.
Yeah.
But then you do have Mother Nature that says, okay, I've got this wicked sense of humor, and this area over here needs to replenish itself, so watch this.
Yes.
And she sets fire. And then you have pyromaniacs that will set a fire and stand around and watch it burn because who knows why. They're idiots. And they don't stop to think that they're not only destroying the environment, they're destroying people's property and in some cases lives. Because if a fire gets out of control, you can hardly get it back under control, especially if the wind shifts.
Yes. And that's everything that you just said about, they set it probably because it excites them, but they just don't realize that it's not only destroying the nature, but it could destroy homes, it can destroy lives, people could die from it, and all of those things are exactly what my character Beth says in the story. Like she's trying to figure out, she's trying to figure out why someone's doing it, because in the story, someone's just going all throughout Central Florida and setting fires just everywhere. And she doesn't know why. It just astonishes her, and she's trying to figure out why someone would do that because she herself does not understand.
And ladies and gentlemen, the book's not even out yet. I haven't even read the book. But see, it's magical. That's why her name is Chrys Fey, because we have this magical thing between us now. You also wrote some shorts. You wrote a novella. You wrote 2 novellas, 30 Seconds Before and 30 Seconds. What are those about?
Well, 30 Seconds was the first one that I wrote. It's about a woman, a doctor, who finds herself in the middle of a war between a criminal mob and a police force. And she comes home one day and runs into a guy in her stairwell. And she goes into her home, and the next thing she knows, the guy bursts into her house. He's a cop. There's a mob coming up their stairwell because they think she is the person who, I guess you could say, one-upped them, even though it's really the cop who did that because he was undercover. But they're looking for him. And because she came into her apartment at that time when they were looking for him, they come after her. So it's really intense. This doctor and this cop, they have to protect each other from this mob. And after I published it, I realized that I needed to write a little bit more about what happened before the opening scene of 30 Seconds and explain what exactly happened and what went wrong when the cop, Blake, was undercover in the mob. So I wrote 30 Seconds Before to tell his story.
Nice. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're into the mystical, the magic, if you will, the supernatural, the paranormal, ghost of death and witch of death all rolled into one. Doesn't get any better than that. What are those two about?
Well, I wrote Witch of Death first. It actually had a different title. It was called Magical Murders at first, and then I added a little bit more to it. It starts out where there is a murder, and it is a murder committed with magic by a witch. And in the next scene, there's a crime scene, and the detectives are there. And one of the detectives, Reed, he's not really happy when he finds out that they have to work with another detective on this case, and her name is Liberty Sawyer, or Libby for short, because he's heard that she's different. He's heard that she's like a psychic, and he doesn't believe in that. He doesn't believe in the supernatural or the paranormal, and he hasn't even seen the crime scene yet. But she walks up as she's listening to him, you know, sort of say, oh, I don't want to work with the psychic. And she comes up and she says, actually, I'm a witch. And
my kind of woman.
And they go in and they see the crime scene, and it's very bizarre. I don't want to give much away, but I'll just say that the corpse is floating above his bed. Yes.
Okay.
And they have to solve the murder. And she says, you know, a witch does it. And Reed thinks she's the murderer after she says that.
So what happens with Ghost of Death?
Ghost of Death, it starts with a young girl. She's about 21, and she wakes up. It kind of sounds weird when you say she wakes up, but she wakes up. She comes to consciousness, I guess you could say, in an alley, and she sees her corpse there next to her, and she realizes that she was murdered, and she doesn't remember anything about the murder, and she stays in the alley until detectives come. And she follows around this one detective. Her name is Avriana Heavenborn. And she wants to pester this detective to find out who killed her. And there's a little twist in there where, well, the detective is a bit supernatural. She has some powers, and she can actually see and hear Jolie, the ghost, and that takes Jolie quite by surprise. And the two of them, they work together to solve the murder. And in some reviews, they say, it's a very shocking and sad murder that it happened to that character. Like some people say it broke their heart because it's just something, I guess, so small and petty. But nowadays, like, people do commit crimes and commit murder for petty things.
Some people commit murder just because they can.
Yeah, that's very true.
Just because they like it. I mean, there is no, sadly, as a society, I think sometimes we've lost our moral compass, and there's no fear and respect for law enforcement, and there's no appreciation for whatever action you commit. There is an equal and opposite reaction, and then there are consequences. So I am very interested in all of your books. I'm going to start. No, y'all can't go now. You got to wait. We only got a few more minutes, so just hang tight. And I can't wait to read your books. They are fascinating to me. And for you to take a childhood memory like the fires and put it into a book, that had to be some kind of catharsis for you as well.
It was an amazing process because I hadn't really written about the fire before. I wrote a very short essay before about the fire, but I never got to explore every detail and memory that I had of the fire. And I rewrote it. I gave it to my characters, and it was a very interesting process, just going through all of that and remembering, like, the sights, the smells, the sounds of the fire and everything. It was a very interesting.
And what people don't realize, when you were doing the census thing, you also had the taste of the fire in your mouth.
Yes.
And
yes,
it has its own unique
like
taste.
ashes.
Yes. And that is a hard thing because it gets up in your nose and in your hair and on your clothes and in your pores and in your mouth. That is a hard thing to get rid of.
Yes, I remember I reeked. Like my clothes, my hair, my nostrils were black, like I had to clean out my nostrils. And I walked into my house that night. The firefighters, they said it was safe to go back. And I walked into the house, and it smelled like smoke all night. While, like, trying to sleep, I would wake up and I would smell the smoke, and my heart would start racing, thinking that the house was on fire or the fire started back up again, because the smell was just so strong in the house. And I swear, when I would wake up, I would see smoke in my room. There was no smoke, but just because I had been looking at smoke for so long outside, it just seemed like it was sort of imprinted on my vision. When I would wake up in the middle of the night, I would see it.
See, ladies and gentlemen, we write what we know. And if you haven't read Chrys Fey yet, it's ChrysFey. After this show is over, go on Amazon and get her books, because Flaming Crimes is coming out soon, if it isn't already out. Is it out yet?
It is not out yet. It will be coming out next year. I do not have a release date, but I can guarantee it will be coming out next year, probably in the first half.
So, and yes, we'll be bringing her back, because y'all know I have to bring my guests back. They become regulars because people expect them. They get a following on this show, which I absolutely love, because as you bring things back into the flux of readers, you've already got people waiting, say, oh, Chrys is going to be on Yvonne's show. What's she got coming out now? So, yes, ma'am, I would be honored if you would come back on the show next year.
I would love to come back. I had a great time.
And you were nervous.
I was. It's just a normal reaction for me. I get nervous over the smallest thing.
But see, all your nerves are gone now. They went away. You're fine. See? Now, and believe it or not, we are coming to the end of our show.
Yeah, you were right. You said that it would go by so quick, and it did.
It did. It goes by really, really fast. So what I want you to do, my darling one, is tell the folks where you can be found, because I want people to come to your Facebook page and friend you so they can keep up with you. So tell everybody where you can be found.
Well, my Facebook page is, of course, facebook.com/Chrys Fey. You can find me on Goodreads. I have a blog, Write with Fey. It's writewithfey.blogspot.com. I have a YouTube channel. I am on Twitter as well and Instagram. And my books are available from the Wild Rose Press. They are also on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, pretty much anywhere you can get a book.
And ladies and gentlemen, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you go and start reading all of her books, because next year when she releases this new book, and maybe by then we will have some more information on the ones that she's rewritten and getting ready to release, you will be all caught up and just sitting there screaming, Chrys, when are you releasing your books? We want the books. We need the books. I find myself doing that. So let Chrys know how much you're interested in her. Support her. She is an indie author. And those of y'all that have been followers of this radio show since the inception understand that I support indie artists. And the reason I do is because they are our future. And we are dreamers. And without the dreams, we would have no society as we know it. So support our indie artists. We love you for it. We've worked hard to get here. We're not like we're published by the Big Six. We don't get $1 million in advance to write a book. We get by the skin of our teeth and hope for the best. Right, Chrys?
We sure do.
But we have fun doing it.
Yes.
And we kick depression to the curb because we don't have room in our life for it. It has to go away. Even though we fight it, it has to, because writing is our drug of choice. So go and support Chrys. Let her know how much you love her work. Friend her on Facebook. Friend her on Goodreads. And write reviews on her book. That is so important. On tomorrow night, I am taking the night off. I am tired. I haven't had any sleep in 3 days because my husband, as y'all all know, is disabled. And some nights he doesn't sleep. When he doesn't sleep, I don't sleep. So then I get where I can't talk, among other things. So I am going to take tomorrow night off. However, on Wednesday night, we will be back fresh and raring to go with my friend and fellow author and artist and judo, karate, martial arts expert, Tom Fertrell. So join us for that show. It's always a hoot with Tom. I never know what the man's up to. I don't think he knows. And as we always say at the end of the show, we love you, our listeners. Chrys, thank you so much, my darling, for the honor and the privilege of you coming on the show and for getting out of your comfort zone. And I hope you had as big a time as I did, because I had a blast.
Yes, thank you. And I really did have a blast.
Good. See how fun that was? And I have a new saying, ladies and gentlemen, with the three that I say. And I stole it from one of my Facebook friends. And it goes this way. The difference between who you are and who you want to be is what you do. Now think about that. The difference between who you are and who you want to be is what you do. And again, if you want to achieve greatness, please stop asking permission, because nobody's going to give it to you. And when you get up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror, don't say, I feel special today. Just be special. Because when you say I feel special, that ain't going to work. Be special. Your smile is your logo. Your personality is your business card. How you leave others feeling after having had an experience with you, ladies and gentlemen, that is your business card. That is your trademark. And I hope that every one of my guests have a good experience on the show. And relax and know it's just me and them having a conversation with 45,000 of our closest friends. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, Chrys Fey and I want to thank you for joining us tonight. She will be coming back. And join me on Wednesday night on Off the Chain with my guest, Tom Futrell. I am Yvonne Mason. My guest tonight was Chrys Fey, ChrysFey. And with that, we say thank you for listening, and we're out of here. Okay, the show's gone off the air. We are now in archives, and of course, everything we say will show up in archives, like I told you. But I did want to thank you again for coming on the show, and I'm glad you had so much fun because I had a blast.
It was great. I'm thrilled that you let me on the show.
Oh, honey, it's an honor. I am only successful because I get y'all to be successful. That's what's fun, is watching y'all succeed. And hearing all the stories and seeing how you got here and encouraging you to, whatever you do, whatever path you take, stay with it, keep the depression at bay, and know that you have a support group with us, with me, and I am available anytime. I will answer any questions. Post your books on my page. Promote yourself on my page. I don't care. That's what it's there for. And just be successful, because you are.
Thank you.
You are quite welcome. And as soon as this goes up, now I will put it on my page. I will tag you in it. Tomorrow I'll put the other 5 podcasts up, and I will tag you in those. And then you take them and put them on your pages, put them on your blog, and get some listeners to your shows and archives. And then we'll bring you back next year.
Great. I will share it everywhere.
All right, and you won't be nervous next time either, because you'll be an old pro at this. So with that, my darling girl, I will say good night. Thank you again for the honor and the privilege of coming on the show and revealing yourself to us, because that's what it's all about. We are the brand.
Yeah. Well, thank you, too, and it was an honor for me as well.
All right, and we will talk later. I'll send you a date, and you tell me if that's a good date for you.
Okay.
All right, talk to you later.
Sounds good. Okay, bye.
Good, bye-bye.
Progressive presents Mindfulness with Flow.
You are a mighty fortress of supreme knowledge. Progressive Direct has not only revealed their rates, but those of their competitors. If you were any more in the know, you would be drowning in, the know.
Compare Progressive Direct rates with competitors' rates, because knowledge is power. Visit Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Progressive presents Mindfulness with Flow.
Before you lies a beautiful meadow. In that meadow, Progressive Direct has placed its auto insurance rates alongside those of competitors. You select the lowest rate and feel a great sense of calm. A great sense of...
Compare Progressive Direct rates with competitors' rates, so you can rest easy. Visit Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.